Hi, my name's Nick Devon, Brisbane's best writer you haven't heard of, and welcome to another episode of After the Hype on Radio Friendly, the weekly series where I sit down with an album after the hype dies down, give it a general thought, and maybe a little whinge after. Today's album is Kanye West's 2010 My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, arguably his magnum opus. I listened to this album a lot back in the day and then sort of steered away from it when I found the sort of genre of hip-hop that I personally enjoy. I was young and this was what was popular and I enjoyed it for the most part, but yeah, I just steered away from it. And then I sort of just got over the excessiveness in Kanye's lyrics and Kanye became sort of what Kanye is now. And this will be the first time in about 6 years that I've really sat down with the album and gave it a serious listen. But is it worth going back? Is it worth the hype? So the album begins with Dark Fantasy and it's automatically you sort of hear what people refer to when they say they want the old Kanye back. You've got some really lush, soulful refrain that are sampled in the music. Sort of the perfect blend between hip-hop and soul, which is what Kanye is sort of known for, and I guess this is the album that sort of cemented him in that field. It's very royal. There's layers of harmony, vocal harmonies layered upon each other, creating a very thick sound. There's fanfare trumpets, just as if they're announcing Kanye into the album. Almost heavenly royalty. And it's kind of, it's different coming back to this after listening to sort of the next three Kanye albums, that Kanye feels sort of very calm and collected on this track. It sounds like he's in control of everything. The lyrics, the beats, his flow's impeccable. It sounds like old Kanye. The beat behind is very staccato and it's on the beat itself, and it's sort of that dun 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 sort of has this tense feeling to it, but it also sort of builds up, very similar to Eminem's Lose Yourself. Great introduction, and it really does get you hyped. Those tense beats get you hyped for what's to come in the album. It transitions into Gorgeous, featuring Kid Cudi and Raekwon from Wu-Tang Clan. This is one of my favorite songs on the album. It's just catchy as hell. There's a slick guitar line, almost like a Lenny Kravitz distorted guitar line that follows Kid Cudi's melody through his refrain, and that's just really cements the catchy melody that Kid Cudi's singing. Kanye's got some distorted vocals that sound real rough and rugged and a bit raw, despite the effect. Some of Kanye's best lines are delivered in this song. He's got an excellent rhyming pattern and his flow is just, it's on point. Raekwon's voice really, it works well with Kanye as well. It's just a bit of a shame that he's all the way in the back end of the track, where he's sort of like a heavyweight of hip-hop. It would have been cool to see him featured a bit more. But in saying that, Cudi's melody through the hook is the catchiest part of the song. Power comes on and it's another really energetic performance by Kanye. Starts off with a solid build and that clapping sound in the background that really gets you pumped up, as if you're watching a marching band introduce someone playing in the NFL. The vocal refrain is sort of hypnotic as it goes back and forth and back and forth. And that plays throughout the entire song against Kanye's verse, and that just becomes real hypnotic as you start to listen to it, and it's very clever. Even though that there's all this going on, the clapping, the vocal refrains, and the beat itself, that all seems very distant in the background. It's showcasing some great production by Kanye here, because he's front and center. Of course he wants to be front and center, but he's front and center in front of all this sort of chaotic sound. And that's sort of what his trademark sound is, I guess, and this is what's featured on the album the most. Instrumentation might be really rich and diverse, but he's front and center commanding the show. All of the Lights comes on next, starts very lush. There's a string interlude that sort of introduces the song that I think is very nice. It's carrying the melody or like the theme that you'll hear from All of the Lights, and then it transitions into another fanfare, this very royal, harmonious introduction. The refrain that All of the Lights, with the horns, it's a very infectious melody and infectious introduction to the song. It's one of Kanye's most memorable songs, and it's probably one of the most memorable off the album too, from the staccato horn melody playing, and as well as Rihanna's sort of sultry, sexy voice hanging in the background, and then coming in with such a strong refrain. She's one of the highlights on the song. She really makes it her own. The dancey beat's a bit different to what Kanye's already presented on the album, but it still works really well. The production, once again, matches the chaotic instrumentation. Voices echo, and they come in and out, they fade in and out. It all works harmoniously. Monster is another powerful track. It just seems like one after another, we're just getting hit with such fantastic songs in the intro to this, in the intro of the album. Universe nasally introduction doesn't really do much for me, but then it transitioned into Rick Ross, where he only has a small part, and that suits well as a transition into Kanye's verse. And Kanye, once again, is on top of his A game lyrically. His flow is just tight. The production that he has on these songs almost matches what his flow is, and even when he has other features coming into the album. It's like he's a suit tailor. He's tailoring these songs to fit the features perfectly, but as well as himself. It's really remarkable. That's the sort of thing, the production value, I didn't really appreciate the first time I listened to this album, and I really didn't appreciate up until this point, really. And it's something that we've seen all year, or we've seen this month with Pusha T, with Cudi, with Nas. It's something that I guess I took for granted, and I'm appreciating a lot on this album. But Monster's features are some of the most energetic on the entire album. It's, you know, it's a really heavy, real driven song, and Jay-Z and Nicki Minaj's verses are real strong. The next track, So Appalled, it's not the best track on the entire album. It's still a solid hip-hop tune, but it just feels like almost a filler track. It's got some great features, but it doesn't really do anything outside of, you know, those core intro songs, or the core first half of the album at least. There is a ironic sort of Donald Trump line in the intro to the song. Balding Donald Trump, taking dollars from y'all. Yeah, it's a bit ironic. Instrumentation isn't as lush and lavish, it's a bit more subtle and sinister. It's the 7th song on the album, and if I was to I was thinking about if we were to use Kanye's sort of formula that he's used in these previous albums this month that he's produced, this is the 7th song. This is what would be closing the album if it came out in 2018. I thought, what would be closing this out? Arguably Runaway, which we'll get into shortly. It's a cult classic song in Kanye's books. If that was to close out on the 7th track, I think arguably I could take an argument that would probably be a 10 out of 10 album. Devil in a New Dress comes on, and it's once again, it's a bit of a different song to what we've already been presented to on this album. There's a soulful mix on the background, like a subtle crack in the background as well, as if this is taken straight off of vinyl record from the 60s. This is Old Kanye. At halfway point on the album, and Kanye really feels as if he's sort of sitting on top of the world. He's already given us 6 stellar tracks, 1 mediocre track, and now we're coming into number 8, and he's pretty much, it's just a real cruisy, laid-back track, real mellow for the halfway point, but I really enjoy it. The backing instrumentation, the sample, the soulful sample in the back, really solid, and so is Rick Ross's feature here. His sort of brute vocals contrast real nicely against Kanye's. And then we get to Runaway. Is Runaway itself worth the hype? I don't fucking think so. I think it's probably one of the most overrated hip-hop songs, one of the most overrated Kanye songs. That ding, ding, ding intro, the piano intro, goes for too long, and it's just unnecessary. I think it's Kanye's first taste of sort of overindulgence, especially on this album, where everything has sort of been very meticulous in production-wise, and sort of his flow and all that, all very meticulous, but then we're just here waiting for this note to finish playing. The 9-minute track. The other songs on the album have already been about 6 minutes at max. You know, they've been 6 minutes long, but at 9 minutes it feels too long. The other ones were long, but they didn't feel that long. I do enjoy the lush instrumentation. You've got some strings coming in, soaring in and out, real deep, woody textures to them, and that sounds nice. And especially in the end, they sort of carry on, but then they sort of overstay their welcome. They're there for too long. First, the hook, the toast for the douchebags line that everyone screams when they're drunk and they're 18. It's just, I've heard it so many times. Maybe it's that I don't like anymore. But I think it's extremely overrated and not the best song. Fuck. And the look at you, look at you, look at you fucking refrain, the sample that comes at you. Yeah, that shit just gets so old. It's so random, and it's sampled sporadically through the song. It's probably it is probably the weakest song on the track listing that I think. A couple songs after that we get a standout track, and that's Blame Game. John Legend's softer vocals are great. He's got a real soulful refrain coming in as he sings the main hook. The very minimal piano melody, but in the back you've got distantly, you can hear these sort of real sporadic drum loops. They're real energetic in the background, but they're so faded, which is a smart move. So then you got Kanye and John Legend in the forefront, and they're owning that song. I like the vocal effect overlaid over Kanye's voice in about the middle of the track. It jumps every line from a high pitch or a low pitch effect, and it's like he's having this internal monologue, this internal feud with himself about sort of infidelity in a relationship, even his relationship with this sort of newfound world acclaim. And then some of the ending songs in the album are okay. Lost in the World, it steals a sample from Bon Iver's Woods, where Bon Iver's got a real shitty high pitch vocal effect on him, and I don't care for it too much. And the song's a bit dancey, but other than that, I skipped that one. Closing track, Who Will Survive in America, doesn't feature Kanye. It's actually features Gil Scott-Heron. It's just a basic Kanye breakbeat against Heron's sort of spoken word poetry, and he's the guy that was sampled on the Black Panther, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. So it's this very political back and forth between him, and it goes on about, sort of summarizes the entire album. If you look into it, it sort of talks about, is all this decadence, is fame and fortune, is it worth it in the end of the day? What do we all lose in the process? Really, it doesn't make a difference at the end of the day. And it's sort of interesting, that closes this album. This is the album that skyrocketed Kanye further into fame, further into hip-hop acclaim. That's sort of the refrain that we get at the end of this album, and you can see where Kanye's ended up now. It's an interesting contrast. It's interesting to look at those two. It's as if he predicted his downfall and then arguably his rise back up with his production in the past month. If you read into it, then it sort of becomes a bit stronger as a finish, but other than that, if you're looking for a banger ending, you're not going to find it here. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is without a doubt the pinnacle of Kanye's career. He's on top of his game lyrically, instrumentally, his production's great, his flow's great. And after this, Kanye changes very dramatically in his instrumentation and his production. And whether you like it or not, this is sort of the end of Old Kanye. I didn't appreciate this album for years, but now as I look back on it and I've found a new appreciation for it, I can pretty much safely say it's in the top 10 hip-hop albums of the 2000s. I'd struggle to say it's my favourite Kanye album because I hold Late Registration so close to my heart. That's sort of the first thing that got me into Kanye. But what I like about this album, and then I've appreciated from Kanye, is the meticulous production that he delivers. If you would even keep it at 7 tracks, and if Kanye did this in 2018, kept it at the first 6 tracks and plus another, you'd be looking at a strong 9. And I could see an argument for a 10 out of 10. Even though I think Runaway is severely overrated, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West is a classic album and is definitely worth the hype. Thanks for watching the video. I'm still fairly new to this whole process. It's a bit different to putting pen to paper. But if you like what you see and you like what you hear, subscribe to Radio Friendly YouTube. And I've got my social media links down in the description. And just follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook for some bands. Thanks.